Well, that was Jim Prentice this morning in his scrum in Edmonton. He didn't respond to Powerplay's request for an interview, but Danielle Smith is going to be his next challenger as the Wild Rose Party prepares for a 2016 election many believe is hers to lose. And Danielle Smith joins us from Calgary. All right, Danielle, are your knees knocking with apprehension now that you've got the acclaimed Jim Prentice to fight in 2016?
Not at all. You know, when we were watching the leadership race, we sort of figured that there would be some policy discussion, that we'd be seeing some back and forth between the different leaders, that there'd be some real meat in the race, and there wasn't. It was pretty well devoid of any policy. It was full of platitudes. And now we're left with a brand new leader that, frankly, looks a whole lot like the previous leader. And it looks like we have some of the same problems that we had under the previous administration. All of the party establishment was behind this person. All of the MLAs and cabinet ministers who created the problems of today were behind this person. When we look at Jim Prentice, we kind of look at it and say it's kind of more of the same, and we're not worried about that.
I was a little struck by on his first day on the job, he's basically kicked that pledge to impose term limits on premiers and MLAs down the ladder, so that's a low priority. And then he amused about appointing unelected Albertans to his cabinet. How do you think that's going to go over?
It's shocking. First, let me deal with the first one. On the issue of term limits, we're not surprised there because we knew when he announced it that it probably wasn't legal. There were all kinds of political and legal scholars saying you just can't do this under our Constitution. It was also a weird promise because he said he was going to grandfather it in and it wouldn't apply to any of the sitting MLAs. Well, it's Albertans want to get rid of some of the sitting MLAs in the PC rank, so that never made sense. And as for the second one, parachuting in cabinet ministers who don't have seats, that to me suggests that he's expressing a lack of confidence in his own government. If you've got 60 MLAs and you don't have enough among 60 MLAs to be able to make a cabinet, you've got a pretty shallow talent pool. And I think that that's what Albertans are going to take from that if that's indeed what he chooses to do.
So your theme's going to be same old party, no new ideas, I take it.
It is the same old party. And Mr. Prentice tried to describe himself as an outsider, but we saw the same kind of tactics that took place during this election campaign. When they couldn't sell enough memberships, he started giving them away, and he took a lot of heat for that. We found out that there were instances of sole source contracts that went from his principal guy to CIBC, his former employer. There was a leak of some really damaging and awful information about one of his rivals in the dying weeks of the campaign, some of the same dirty tactics that we've seen before. And as I said, virtually no policy discussed through the whole thing. So we don't really have any understanding of where Mr. Prentice will take the province, but being that he has all of the same people surrounding him, all of the same people who backed the previous premier surrounding him, we suspect that we're not going to be seeing much in the way of change, which is why the real change is going to come in the next election.
I think it's always interesting, and the PCs have been in power since the year you were born, if my memory serves correctly, and yet every time they're in trouble, right. every time they get a weak leader, like a Don Getty, in comes a Ralph Klein. Or if they get a Ned Stalmack, in comes Redford, Alison Redford, who for a while there was quite popular. Are you saying that Jim Prentice is not going to be good enough to save the party from the Alison Redford, scandal hangover, if you will?
It was a snooze fest. I mean, you would have been appalled having covered Alberta politics as long as you did before you went to Ottawa. The fact that only 23,000 people voted, I think the line of the night went to Janet Brown, a pollster, who said 23,000 would be considered a bad turnout for a football game. And that is the problem that they have, is in the past, this used to be the way to energize a party. They sell 50 or 100,000 memberships. People get excited. There's been no excitement on this race. And I think that the reason for that is that in the past, when you elected a leader, you had the idea that they were going to stick around for a while. We are now on the fourth PC premier that I've seen since I became leader only 5 years ago. So I don't think anybody really believes that just changing the leader is the way to change the party. They don't want to see platitudes. They don't want to see promises. They want to see action. And until Mr. Prentice actually comes through with some concrete ideas, some concrete plans where we see where he's going to run, see whether he wins his by-election, see who he puts in cabinet, I don't think people are going to be convinced that there really is any change.
Are you considering a plan at all to give him a free pass into the legislature by not contesting that by-election race?
No, we're going to contest the by-election race. And part of the issue is that you see with the PCs, they have such disrespect for the opposition, such disrespect for the opposition parties. And so it's very convenient for them to try to pull the protocol card when it suits them. But the fact of the matter is they don't follow protocol when it comes to the treatment of other elected members. And so they get what they're going to get in the next election, in the by-election, is that they're going to have likely 3, maybe even 4 of who are going to put forward candidates to be able to challenge their leader, and also any other by-election races that might be taking place. I think it's quite telling that Mr. Prentice has said he's not going to run in the seat that was left when Alison Redford ended up retiring. That suggests to me that he actually doesn't think he can win in that seat. So he's going to initiate a by-election somewhere else. So we're going to have at least 2 by-elections. There's a couple of members who are thinking of going federal, so maybe we'll have 4 by-elections. There's a couple of other cabinet ministers we hear who might retire early. So this could almost be like a bit of a midterm race where we get to cast judgment on the PC government, and we are looking forward to sending the PCs a message. I think Albertans are too.
Well, last question, Danielle Smith, is do you think he's going to get any favoritism from the Harper Conservatives to help him out as the Premier of Alberta?
I've been very pleased to see that Mr. Harper and his members of Parliament have really tried to stay neutral. We all come together to support our federal candidates when it comes to by-elections and when it comes to general elections. But I think that they've tried to stay neutral for the most part in this little civil war that we have in Alberta until we see how it ends up sorting itself out. But make no mistake, we do truly believe that there is an incredibly important choice to be made in Alberta in the next election, one that will continue down the path of government that is overspending, that has ethical challenges, that has not been able to demonstrate any kind of competence, or another new party, the Wild Rose, that is going to actually return to some of those solid fiscal conservative principles that served us so well in Alberta for so long under previous premiers.
Danielle Smith, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Don.